Welcome back to Keep and Crochet. Today I'm going to show you how to make this project. This is a hairpin lace project and it's actually going to be a little cowl. It's not finished yet, so I'm making it flat and then I'm going to join it in around to make a little lacy cowl. But first we need to finish it. So to make this project you're going to need, well, it's a great scrap project. So I actually used a mini kit. This is DK weight minis from Blue Fiber Company. So each one's 20 grams. You don't have to use DK yarn if you don't want to, but just be aware that you'll need to modify how many stitches are in your hairpin lace strips. So this would look really great in fingering, but I might add some more stitches to make sure it's not too small. If you use a heavier weight yarn, then you'll want to, well, you could keep the same number of stitches, but you'll need more yarn. Okay, so these 4 strips have already been done. To make this project, you're going to need 5 strips of hairpin lace, and I've showed how to make hairpin lace strips in a different video, so here's one already done, and I use these guide yarns to keep my loops straight. For those of you not familiar with hairpin lace, this is what a hairpin lace loom looks like, so you'll need one of these to make the strips. And like I said, if you're not familiar with how to make hairpin lace strips, I have another video showing how to do that, and I've linked it in the description, so you can start there if this is new to you. These looms are super cheap. You can get one of these for like less than $10 on Amazon, or they sell them at like Michael's and Joann's, and a lot of times they'll even come with a hook, so you can pick one of these up super cheap. And making a strip, this is just a basic strip, nothing fancy. I've got my loom set at 3 1/4 inches, and when you're measuring your loom, you want to measure it from the outside of each bar. So when I'm measuring this one, this is still set how I had it. You can see that from the outside of one bar to the outside of the other bar is 3 1/4 inches. Now, if your different looms will have different hole settings, you can see there's little holes in the bottom here to put the little loom piece through. It's hard to see on my video. But if yours doesn't have holes that will let you get right at 3 1/4 inches, that's okay. Just get it as close as you can. 3 inches would work, 3 1/2 inches would work. The bigger your strip, the longer these loops are going to be. So if you want it to have longer loops, you can purposefully make bigger strips. If you want it to be more condensed, then you can make smaller strips. That's really just a matter of preference. You can do whatever you'd like. Okay, so once you have your strip of lace, I'm going to show you how to connect these. But when you make, so I'm going to show you 2 things. One is how to make the strips and connect them at the same time, to do the edging at the same time and connect it. But if you weren't connecting it, you would just leave out the join, and I'll explain that more. And then I'm also going to show you how I did this finished edge. So this bottom edge isn't going to have another strip attached, and I added these little picots on the edge. So I'll show you how to do the very end and a join. So first of all, when you're working with hairpin lace, it's a really good idea to have guide yarns. Oh, I never tied this off. Oh well. So these strands, just make sure that your loops stay straight. They're really, really useful, because if your loops are twisted, then your project isn't going to look as good. And some hairpin lace projects are more forgiving than others. This one, it's kind of a messy look already, so if you had some loops twisted, it's not going to be a huge problem, but it's always going to look nicer if your loops are not twisted. So I highly recommend using a guide yarn or thread of some sort. This is just a ball of, I don't know, regular craft thread that I have stayed around my house. You could use scrap yarn, you can use thread, you can use just regular sewing thread if you want to. It really doesn't matter as long as you have something that's going to help keep your strand straight. So you can leave the guide strand on while you're doing this join. It's totally fine. And I'm actually going to turn my project around so it's easier to crochet. All right. So for this project, I'm not being too picky about which side I start from. It doesn't really matter as far as my hairpin lace strand is concerned. Get this out of the way. Okay, so to get started here, I'm going to use the same color yarn that I made this strip out of. Got plenty left. And I'll just start with a slip knot. So I'm going to insert my hook through the first 2 loops, keeping them straight again. Here, let me lower my camera. So I'm inserting my hook through the first 2 loops, and I'm going to grab loops 3 and 4 and pull them through the first 2 loops. Okay, so I've made this like cross here. Now I'm going to single crochet in each of these loops. So single crochet in the first loop, then I'll single crochet in the second loop. So those are the 2 loops I pulled through, right? So I've got, these are actually the first and second loop, but I've pulled the third and fourth that are now my new first 2 loops. So I have 2 single crochets. Now I'm going to chain 2. Now if this was like this outside edge that I was going to later join something to, I would just chain 4. But since I need to join it, I'm going to chain 2, and then I'll get my old strip. And you can see there's this space in the middle, and that's where I did a chain 4 on this side. So I'm going to remove my hook from this, insert it through this space, grab that loop again, and pull it through. And now I'll chain 2 more. So I'm still chaining 4, but it's a join as you go. So I'm joining it to that previous chain. And now I'm going to do single crochets in those last 2 loops. And I forgot to mention that when you're making the hairpin lace strips, I made them 96 stitches long, and it's going to be a pretty tight cowl for me. If you wanted it to be looser, you could do more stitches, but again, that's going to take more yarn. Okay, so that's my first little cluster done. So now I'm just going to do the same thing for each cluster across. So you can see on this previous row that I did 2 single crochet, chain 4, 2 single crochet, and then I just do the same thing all the way across. 2 single crochet, chain 4, 2 single crochet, making that cross by pulling the loops through. So I'm doing the same thing here, I'm just joining when I do the chain 4. Okay, so next I'm going to pull, so I've got 4 loops, I'm going to pull the 3rd and 4th loop through the 1st and 2nd loop. And then I'll do single crochet in each of these 2 loops, making sure I don't twist the loops. And now I need to join, so I'm going to do chain 2, remove my hook, find the next chain 4 space on the other strip, insert my hook in, pull through, and chain 2. And now I'll come back over here and finish my last 2 single crochets for this strip, this bundle, whatever you want to call it. Okay, and now I'll do the same thing, insert my hook through those loops, pull the 3rd and 4th loop through the 1st and 2nd, and then single crochet, 1 single crochet in each of these 2 loops. And now my chain 4, so I'm going to chain 2, remove my hook, insert it in the chain 4 space here, grab the loop and pull it through, then finish my chain 2, and now 2 more single crochet in my last 2 loops. So you can see this is really quite simple, but it makes this fun join, and it's super stretchy. I actually really love this yarn that I'm using. It's not cheap, but it is super soft. It's a cash merino, 80% merino and 20% cashmere. Super, super soft. Okay. I'm going to keep going and do this whole strip. So I'm pulling loops 3 and 4 through loops 1 and 2. And single crochet, chain 2, remove my hook, insert it in here, grab my loop and pull it through, then chain 2. And now single crochets in those last 2 loops. One of the trickiest things about hairpin lace is just making sure you don't skip any of the loops. So it's a good idea to periodically go back and check your work and just make sure that you don't have any spare loops, and especially if you look on the back, sometimes they'll pop out. So I'm okay for now, but just something to be aware of. One of the kind of quirks of hairpin lace. I know it's really frustrating to get to the end of a strip and be short a loop and then find it near the beginning of the row that you missed one. And there are lots and lots of different ways to join hairpin lace strips. This is just one way. It's a fun technique that you can experiment with. I think the other hardest thing about hairpin lace, especially designing it, is that it's really hard to tell how long the strip is going to be once it's finished. So I could have actually made these a little bit longer even with the minis, but I was worried that I was going to run out of yarn, so I didn't want to stretch it too much. You can make these any length you like, just do it in a multiple of 4 stitches, since each cross here we're making is with 4 loops. So, and all of your hairpin lace strips need to be the same length. So now I'm at the end of this row, so I'm just going to cut my yarn here and tie it off. I'm going to use this tail later to tie the cowl into a circle, but for now I'm just going to tie it off. Okay, now we've got one more part to do, so I'm going to turn this around so I can work this last edge. And notice I still have my guide yarn in there. I haven't taken it out yet because I still have all these loops. Now if you like random fringy stuff, you could just leave those loops how they are. That's totally up to you. I'm going to finish it off with a row of picot cross things. So again, I'm just going to take my yarn and tie a slip knot. And I'm going to start this exactly the same way as I started the last row. I get the first 4 loops on my hook. And I'll pull the 3rd and 4th loop through the 1st and 2nd. Like that. I'll do single crochets in each of these 2 loops. And now if I had another strip to join after this, I would just do a chain 4 and then single crochet in each of these 2 loops. But because this is my last row, I'm instead going to do a chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to slip stitch into the 2nd chain. So 1, 2, 3, the 4th chain from the hook, my 2nd chain of the 5. And that makes that little picot. Then I'm going to chain 2 and finish my single crochets here. Now I'm just going to do the same thing in the next bunch. I'll take 4 onto my hook, pull the 3rd and 4th through the 1st and 2nd, single crochet in each of these 2 loops, chain 5, slip stitch in the 2nd chain, then chain 2, and do my single crochets in the last 2 loops. You can see it's making these little picot nubbies, and that also kind of helps hold the space in between the sides of the cross. So I'm going to do this edging all the way around, or all the way across this row. And you, of course, are welcome to do as many rows as you want. You don't have to do just 5. And I think this cowl would look really great with longer strands, but because I used minis, I didn't have enough to make it longer. So if you're not short on yarn, you can make this longer. You could make it a whole scarf length, you know, whatever you want to do with it. It is your project after all. I've had this one sitting in my bag for like 2 months waiting for me to film it. Maybe not 2 whole months, but pretty close. So I'm glad to be getting it done here. I can actually wear it. What? I tried to round up a bunch of fun patterns that used mini skeins, and it was disappointing. There aren't that many. There are a lot for knitters, but not so many for crocheters. So I've got this one, and then I have another set of minis that well, actually I have 2 other sets of minis that I'm planning projects for. So I'm gonna find a use for those minis if you have them, or if you don't buy mini sets, you can just use scrap yarn, because I know a lot of us are gonna have 20 grams or more of scrap yarn. And I'll be honest again, I really don't like using scrap yarn because I really hate weaving in ends. And if you use smaller balls of yarn, you end up with a lot more ends to weave in. But I also don't like throwing away yarn, so, you know, sometimes you just gotta do it. And mini sets just look so pretty. I'm always tempted by them. Remember what I was saying about missing a loop? I only have 3 left. And so when I look on the back side here, I can see that I missed a loop. So I'm going to go back and grab that loop. Whoops. Thankfully, it wasn't too far back, so I didn't have to undo very much. Alright, so that's the end of that round. Cut the yarn. Tie it off, and now I don't need this guide yarn anymore because all of my loops are worked. So I'm just going to snip one end, and then I can just pull it out the other end. And now my stitches are free. I can spread them out. And I'm loving that green color, that dark green with all the variation in it. So fun. Okay, so now we've got 5 strips all worked together, and I need to join it into a cowl. So all I'm going to do is just fold it over on itself, and I'm going to use these ends, the end yarns, the tails I guess, to tie it together. So when I tie this together, you know, depending on how much you care what it looks like, you can weave it in to try and make the stitches look really nice, or you can just tie square knots and call it good. And I am lazy, so I'm just going to tie a square knot and see if that works. And notice that in between each cross of loops, normally, it doesn't join. So I don't need to tie anything together with these loops. I'm just going to join the centers of each strip and the ends of each row. And because this is such a kind of messy, funky pattern, I think these square knots are going to be just fine. I'll still weave in ends just so the knots don't come undone, but it's really not very noticeable. Okay, so I'm just going to keep doing this with every pair of ends if I can find them. And I'm not pulling it too tight because I don't want to suck the other parts of the round in. And this is not the way I end every hairpin lace project, but this one, yes. You can see what it's looking like at the join. It is a little bit more gappy than the other spaces, but that's not going to bother me. I don't care. If you care, you can tie it tighter or weave in the ends tighter or whatever. But this is all I'm going to do. I like to keep things simple. Now, if you really wanted it to look super nice, you could block it before you join it. But once again, I am lazy, so I'm not going to do that. Okay, now like I said, I am going to weave all these loose ends in so they're not just sticking out all over the place. So that is this cowl project, and it's very stretchy. It's even more stretchy widthwise. So it looks too narrow to fit over your head, but it does actually fit over your head. It's quite stretchy, and it looks pretty cool. So this is this pattern. Like I said, you're welcome to take this design and make it scarf length, or I don't know, make a cardigan out of it. I don't know, it's kind of cool. But that is what this looks like, all stretched out. This would make a fun shawl, actually, or like a wide scarf. Alright, this one is a free pattern on my blog. You can get the link to the written directions in my blog post below. And like I said, the videos for how to create strips of lace and how to use the guide yarns are also linked in.